If My People, Bible reading, part 95, the book of Ruth, where it should be. Um, this is a very small book, four chapters. It's a very powerful book. It's a link. It's a it's a vital link to what Yahweh wanted us to understand about Him and His Son. So, Ruth, it's the story of a foreign girl. She is not of the 12 tribes. She's like us. She is, I am really confident in being Naphtali. Got my bagpipes, my family crest, and the lineage that goes back hundreds of years. And I can go back to the days of about the 12th century, where they talked about it in all writings that the Scots kept. The Scots and the Irish were very, very good at records back in those days. But I think it was 1750s or whatever, the archives in Ireland burned to the ground and took out an enormous amount of documentation and books that the Irish heretofore had been the keepers of incredible records. And the Scots people talked that they were Dan, and they were the tribe of Judah. They had Judah in them, and they also had Naphtali in them. But of course, we can all argue about that today because the records burned, didn't they? But it doesn't really matter because this is the book of Ruth, and Ruth is two things we're going to really concentrate on. It is grafted in, which you don't read anywhere in the book of Ruth, but you're going to see it. We're about to show it to you. And redemption. What is redeeming? What is a pawn that I talked about a number of books ago? What is being redeemed from a pawn store mean? So she's a little foreign girl. She's a Moabite. And she came out of the people who were in many senses outcast. But they had the knowledge of Yahweh in them, as Boaz says in Ruth 2:12. And you can read them. You have supposed to have already read this. This is a short evening read before you call your chips in and you go to bed at night. Ruth has only 4 brief chapters, and it gives a genealogy that leads to the Lord Adonai Yeshua. That is what you hear in the pulpits and the institutionalized churches, and that's a good thing. They don't always teach lies there. They teach a lot of good things. It's just they keep you as a 5-year-old child. There's the problem I have with the institutionalized churches more than anything, is they don't want you to think. They want you to be dependent on them and give them your weekly tithes, which once again I say, I've read the Bible. It ain't in there. There's no weekly tithes anywhere in the Bible. There's twice a year that we know of. Once a year that we know for a fact. That's the fall feasts. And by the way, that's when the Roman Empire was smart enough to know that they didn't collect taxes on a weekly base from all those peoples. They collected them when they all got together because the tribes of Judah and the other tribes that came, there was more than just Judah, would come to the fall feast, and they would hear and obey, and they would be there. So the Romans had them trapped, and even Yeshua had to pay a tax, which he got from a fish's mouth, but that's another story. So that's what you learn. But what is it you don't learn from the institutionalized churches? That's why we've created this 15-minute section of If My People Bible Reading. One of them is from the book of Ruth here, and it's because she is not of the 12 tribes. She's not the called out ones. She's not the ones that crossed over Hebrew to cross over. No, she is a Moabite, but she has, in the lineage inside of her, she has the blood that went through that where we get Yeshua from her mother, the mother and father of Yeshua. It's there, and it's given. So this genealogy is a great big deal to institutionalized churches, but they need to talk about more than anything else is redeeming value. What is a redeemer? There are commentators who also take position that the primary book, as I said, is genealogy. While we agree with that, we also disagree with the main purpose of it. redeeming. The book of Ruth is a very important connection with the coming of Yeshua into the world. Without this little book, this one here, we could not connect all the dots to the house of David, with the tribe of Judah. That's where David comes from, through his father Jesse. And it's important to link that together because it begins with Genesis right down to the stable in Bethlehem and goes to the tree, the cross, to the crown, to the throne of David, on which our Yeshua will someday reign. He will reign on the David's seat. So, because David's seat is actually his seat. Once again, however, the primary purpose of the book of Ruth is a presentation of an important phase in documentation, redemption, redeeming, kinsmanship, redeemer. What does that mean? Yahweh could not redeem apart from a mediator because of sin. Somebody had to be a mediator, someone without sin. Someone who can say, as Yahweh said, that person has committed a sin, they are adulterous. No marriage for you. And Yeshua cleanses them and presents the bride again and said, Father, how about this bride? And the 144,000 bridesmaids will be presenting themselves one day. And then the sheep, those who hear the word but don't carry out the word, those who profess the name of Yeshua and wear the helmet of salvation, but they do not wear the full armor. They don't wear the full armor that Paul says you must have. You need to have the full armor if you're going to be a bridesmaid. But that's why there's a millennial. So there's going to be a wedding, and there's going to be millions of guests, and those are the Christians. So does that mean they're going to hell? No. It just means that they're going to hear and obey, and those that live and die in that millennial time period have as much opportunity to enter the final kingdom as the brides themselves. Now that's important. Wouldn't you, if you invited 1,000 people to your wedding, wouldn't you want them to come to you on your honeymoon with Yeshua forever? I think you would. And you wouldn't want to lose a one of them, would you? Because you invited them to the wedding by your shepherding them to the instruction of what is really royal Torah. What is really royal Torah? What is the feast and festivals, the appointed times, the Shabbats? All this before Exodus 24. All this before up on the mountain in Exodus 30. All of that. The people back in Exodus 19 said, yes, we will hear and obey. There's the invitation, and there's their acceptance. Of course, they committed adultery after that through the paganism. So we have a Redeemer, and that's who Yeshua is. So the book of Ruth is very important. So in chapter 1, we're in the land of Moab. Chapter 2, we're in the fields of Boaz. Chapter 3, the threshing floor of Boaz. And chapter 4, in the heart and the home of Boaz. Now, is that important? Well, let me go to chapter 2, verse 20 of the book of Ruth. Yahweh bless him. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. He is the one of our kinsman redeemers. Comment, redemption is a word associated with Yeshua. In those days, the rightful next of kin would save his relative who has fallen into bondage, lost their inheritance, etc. Sin. Again, the Messiah redeems those who seek him for the payment of the debt of sin. Accordingly, this is a punishable by death under Levitical law. But we're not under Levitical law now, right? That's what Paul's talking about. Not all the law, Levitical law. And plus, Mr. Christian, as we've mentioned, and as you can mention to the Christians, how about the 1,050 Torah commands in the new covenant, which we're getting to. Wait till we get to that. You will grab those and never let go of them. But not if Yeshua would return before the Jubilee year of redemption. According to this is punishable by death, but not if Yeshua would return before the Jubilee year of redemption. So there is a time when the Father will send the Son to gather the bride. That's coming up. So now we're in chapter 4, last sentence, 22. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of David. We conclude this book of Ruth, by seeing the condition that the world is in without a Redeemer. Boaz was an example to Yeshua. He met all the conditions of the Kinsman Redeemer. He was near to us because he came to us in the form of a man. Secondly, he is willing to redeem. Third, he was free from himself, one without sin. And lastly, he must be able to pay the price. Yeshua took the price and put it all on himself. His Father found Yeshua sinless. Those redeemed can then enter into his holiness. So, where we're going into this, when we get into the 4 books of Samuel, 2 Samuel, Kings, and 2 Kings, in close examination, we will find that these books cover what is to be the millennial to come. We need a strong king with power to exercise it in righteousness. We need a king who will rule in full dependence upon Yahweh. We need a king who will rule in full obedience to Yahweh. None of these things occur in the 4 books you are about to read. When we get to them, you can see the importance of the coming kingdom, where Yeshua represents the true Melchizedek type of government, that is, a high priest and a king of kings. Most institutionalized churches and synagogues teach that there is no absolute evil in the form of Lucifer or Hasatan. They can never be wrong more than deceiving the nations today. Saul represents Hasatan's man throughout. Saul wants the power, and when he gets it, he abuses all those under his control and his authority. Thus, the man, Saul wants the power, and when he gets it, of all authority. Thus, the perfect example of how and why Hasatan fell when he took on the vision and desire of the throne of Yahweh comes to an explanation of understanding. All right, the book of Ruth, very important. Kinsman Redeemer. We have one, Yeshua.